everybody, and welcome to today's DreamWakers Daily Conversation. My name is Erin, and I'm so excited that today I'll be talking to Miss Ellie Quinlan of the United States Institute of Peace Public Visitor Programs. But before we get to the conversation, we've actually got a short video that we'll be showing you where Ellie herself will be taking us on a virtual tour of the USIP headquarters in Washington, D.C. So stay tuned for that video right after this, and then you'll be able to watch the conversation after the video ends.
Hi, welcome to USIP. I am so excited to show you around. Let's get started. Welcome to the headquarters of the U.S. Institute of Peace. This is really the hub for the peace building work that we do around the world. And there are a few features of our building that are important to point out. This is a really bright space. You can see the windows behind me. They're symbolizing the transparency in the work that we do. And there are bridges connecting the different offices that are in this building, and that also symbolizes the bridge building work that we do. This reception area is called Congressional Pavilion, and it's named in honor of bipartisan congressional support that helped found USIP, and it continues to this day in support of the work that we do. So let's head downstairs and I'll show you some of the spaces that we use in our work. So I call this the hub of the US's work to build peace around the world, and we use this beautiful space in a few different ways. Around me, on either side of this atrium, are offices. We have 200 people in the DC office who work on all sorts of issues related to peace and conflict every single day. And on this side of me are event spaces that are used for large public gatherings, like when heads of state come to town to talk about their latest policy issue, or policymakers who want to hash out the details of something that's at the top of the headlines that day. We also have quiet private meeting spaces where some practitioners get together to talk about the nitty-gritty details of things that they're working on. And where we are is also significant. We're on the National Mall, which is really important. USIP is a living monument to the work that the US does to build peace around the world. We're right across the street from memorials and monuments that pay honor to the sacrifice that Americans have made to wars throughout our history, and we are here as a complement to that story. I'm going to show you a scale model of the building to give you a sense of where we are. So we started here in our reception area, and you can see that the roof of the building really does look like a dove. It's made of lots of panes of glass, and especially here on the National Mall, it really makes us stick out as a symbol of peace. So we're here right now. Let's walk out here to the terrace. I've already shown you the Lincoln Memorial and where we are on the National Mall. Over here is the US Capitol, and we have a really strong relationship with Congress. Our staff and thought leaders are often on Capitol Hill briefing members of Congress and their staff. So thanks for coming to visit USIP. Hope you enjoyed it.
Pleasure to have you, and thank you so much for taking the time to answer all of the questions from our students and teachers today.
It's my pleasure.
Thank you. So just to start us off, a lot of students we've noticed are learning about the United States Institute of Peace for the first time. So I was wondering, for just all of our viewers, if you could elaborate a little bit on what USIP is and some examples of the work that you do.
Sure, I'd be glad to. So the United States Institute of Peace is this nation's national institution that focuses on building peace around the world and resolving conflicts without resorting to violence. And so we do that work in a few different ways. We train, we say we think, and so in some ways we're very much like another think tank in Washington, D.C., and we also act in the field. And so we run programs across the world in some in active conflict zones, some in places that are just recovering from conflict, and in other places that are fragile. and at a risk of becoming affected by conflict. So that's where we work, and we've been around since 1984. We were established by members of Congress and as a result of a grassroots effort across this country. So we're headquartered in Washington, D.C., and we work around the world on issues of global conflict.
Amazing. And I think that segues really well into our first community question, which is from a 12th grader in Georgia, who is wondering a little bit more about how and why the public education program was established in connecting, the very diverse American public.
That's a great question. So our department, public education, has been around since 2011, and we work exclusively with domestic American audiences. And we're the only part of the Institute that works in the United States. Everyone else is focused on working abroad, but we have the special task of working with schools, communities, with groups of retirees and groups of veterans, the American public writ large, and sharing about USIP's work around the world. And so I mentioned that USIP kind of came about as a result of efforts on Capitol Hill, members of Congress, but also as a result of efforts outside of Capitol Hill across this country. So USIP has a really deep history of being connected with grassroots and being the product of American public interest in global peace building. And so we connect the work that USIP does in continuing that tradition with communities that are still interested in that work all around the US. And USIP is fully funded by Congress. And so we feel really responsible for being accountable to the American people because we are funded by taxpayer dollars. And so we want to make sure that we are also serving the American people in the work that we do.
Amazing. Yeah. Well, we are obviously in a really unique situation right now with the COVID-19 pandemic. A lot of offices, schools, communities are now working from home and doing things virtually. And I'm wondering, how has that affected USIP's work? And can we all just still be peace builders from home?
Yes, we definitely can be peace builders from home. That's the good news. Things have changed. For my team, usually I'm welcoming groups in our building, and obviously I am not in USIP's headquarters today. And around the world where we run programs, where we have offices, really almost all of our teams have moved to a telework posture. And so what that means is that we're connecting virtually with groups. So just like we're connecting today, the communities that we work with, say, for example, the communities that we work with in Iraq, they are also using Skype, WhatsApp, Zoom to connect and talk about their work so that progress they've made, relationships that they've built, that those are still taking place, and that just because of physical distancing, that's not an impediment to continuing the work that they do. One of the programs that we do is called Justice and Security Dialogues, and they bring together members of the community and members of the security sector to improve relations, to build trust, and to kind of create and strengthen lines of communication so that they can work through issues together, so that the security sector feels more accountable to the citizens, and so that citizens feel like they can trust that the security sector is going to listen to them when they bring issues forward. So that type of program we typically do in a conference room or in a classroom, and it's face-to-face. That these days looks really different. And so those groups are connecting on virtual platforms, and USIP is helping make those connections. And I will say just another aspect of our work is being sort of sharing the expertise that we have in peace processes, in resolving conflicts, and sharing that with the broader community and with policymakers and people that are really thinking about these issues on a daily basis. And so some of our experts in this time of COVID-19 pandemic have thought about how is this kind of global pandemic and a shift to physical distancing going to impact peace processes? How is it going to impact, say, in Afghanistan, where the Taliban and Afghan government and the United States are trying to reach a peace agreement? How is this pandemic going to impact that process? But also maybe what are the opportunities that we might not see right from the get-go? And so sharing our expertise about how does this play out in all sorts of fragile environments.
Wow. Well, that was very interesting to hear, and honestly very inspiring that technology can bring us together even if we are physically apart, and that we can still really come to these peace building situations. So that's really great. Our next question comes from a 4th grade class in Oklahoma, an elementary school, who just asks, is it hard to spread peace?
Yes, it can be really hard. I like to say that one of the kind of qualities that unites peace builders is they're really stubborn. They have a vision for peace and they just work at it and they don't take no for an answer. And so it takes a lot of stubbornness to be a good peace builder. And I think it's especially hard if you're doing it alone. And so one of the things that USIP tries to do is bring people together that are working on the same issues. Because if you're working at something alone, you can be stubborn and determined, but you can feel really alone and isolated in your efforts. And you might not know that there are other people out there working for the same things. And so it becomes less hard if you connect with people who are also working toward the same end. So we do that work here in the US, right? Trying to bring together and connect communities in the US that are working to build peace, or they're learning about building peace, connecting them to each other and connecting them to our experts and the work and the skills and the training that USIP has to offer. And we also do it abroad with people working in the same country. Colombia is a really good example of that, actually, that women in Colombia were kind of at the forefront of community efforts to build peace a number of years ago, especially as kind of the national level peace agreement between the FARC and the government was being reached. And these women didn't know that there were other women just like them working all around the country in their own individual communities. And USIP helped connect them. And now they're a network of local peace builders that, because they were able to come together and get connected, they made their voices heard at the national level, and their perspectives were included and really valued by the parties to the peace agreement, so that their local perspectives were really taken into account in that final agreement.
Wow, that's really incredible. To kind of bring it to a more local, a smaller scale level, a lot of our students, of course, are working in teams or working with each other, and you can't always get along with everybody. So do you have any advice about how, just on a day-to-day level, we can approach conflict and hopefully keep the peace in these situations?
Definitely, yes. Conflict is always going to be a part of life, right? Because we're human. And so I think one of the first steps is to get familiar with that idea and not fear conflict or fear the idea of conflict. It's all about how you manage it, right? When conflict happens, how do you manage it in the moment and manage it with the people that are in that conflict so that you can avoid a violent or really negative outcome and instead use it as an opportunity for transformation and solution. I think conflict can be a really great catalyst for bringing about change and progress. So in a day-to-day setting, I think one of the best things you can do is get really good at learning to be a good listener and learning to understand different perspectives. And there are skills that you can learn to become a better active listener. So you can reflect back to someone what you think you heard them say so that you understand what their perspective is and they know that you understand. Or it also gives them an opportunity to clarify what it is they were trying to say, because maybe they weren't communicating exactly what it was that they were trying to. You can learn how to mediate conversations between two people that are in conflict so that you can help them take a step back from being really deeply entrenched in their personal perspectives, and find some sort of common ground that way. I think that idea of finding common ground and uniting around something that you agree on, even if it's something totally different, like say you're having an argument about a school project, but you know the other person really likes ice cream, or you guys are the fans of like the same basketball team. If you start with something that you agree on, even if it's totally unrelated, you can build a relationship around that thing, and then over time can figure out how do you build that relationship and trust into having a good conversation about whatever it is that you're having a conflict about.
Mm-hmm. That's all great advice. And hopefully just by being good listeners and tuning into this stream, they're already on, the path to becoming a better peace builder. So that's really great. Our next question comes in from an 11th grader, also from Georgia, who wants to know what made you in particular want to pursue a career with USIP?
That's a great question, and thank you for asking it. I started getting interested in international issues when I was in high school. So every morning my dad and I would read our local newspaper, and I only read the comics section. And I loved comics, and I still do today. Nothing is wrong with comics, but I started noticing his parts of the paper were the front page and the business section and the world section. And I started reading the headlines and not knowing anything about the stories behind them. And over time started, reading the articles and asking him questions about it. And then in one of my summers in high school, I did a summer program that came to Washington, D.C., and it was all about international relations and being a student leader. And that really opened my perspective. It was a really great opportunity, and I worked really hard for it. I babysat a lot and saved up my money, and my mom took on another shift at the hospital, and it was really a big effort to get there. But once I did, it really opened my perspective about international relations and who are the people that work in international relations and how could I get a career in that. So I figured out that I really did like these issues. And so when I went to college, I studied diplomacy and world affairs, and I had opportunities in college to study abroad, to work abroad. I worked in Rwanda, which is in East Africa. And after college, I did a fellowship program in Kenya, which is also in East Africa. And when I was in Kenya, I worked on humanitarian issues with a large humanitarian organization. And the people we were working with were fleeing conflicts from neighboring countries. And that really gave me a firsthand perspective of how negative and impactful and long-lasting the consequences of conflict can be. And so I learned really the value and strength of humanitarian work, and I decided that I wanted to be at the other side of conflict, right, to help be part of the efforts that stop it from happening or mitigate the impacts of it. And that led me to USIP. And so a little while after that, I started working at USIP in Washington, D.C.
That's an amazing story, and a really, really great journey for you. Our next question is from a 12th grader who is asking kind of about you and the other people who work in the awesome, really public education program. And they're curious, what have you discovered or learned as you travel around the United States?
That's a great question. One of my favorite parts of my job, and I know this is true for the other people on my team too, we love connecting with people from around the country. Washington, D.C. can sometimes feel like a bubble. And so we really enjoy welcoming people to headquarters in D.C., but also getting out into the rest of the country and bringing USIP to communities across the country in all 50 states, which is really great that we've been able to make connections with schools and educators and communities in all 50 states now, which is really great. One thing that really surprises me and gives me hope for the future of peace building is that people are genuinely interested across this country and being active peace builders in their own communities, and making an impact on peace building efforts abroad too. And that sometimes you can feel kind of isolated in your efforts or interest, but there is a whole constellation of people across this country that are also interested in these issues. And when you add your voice to that constellation, the cumulative effort can be really impactful. And so I just love hearing people's stories about why they're interested in the work, and seeing the different ways that people apply their unique skill sets to making some sort of positive impact.
That's great. And it's both great to hear, and I know also sometimes surprising for people to hear just how connected we are, even if we're across the country. We all have those ideas that are similar to each other. And I think most of us all want peace. So it's really great to hear. True. So our last community submitted question comes from a 5th grader named Kylie in Kentucky. And I think it's just a great way to kind of round out the conversation today. She wants to know that, do you believe kids can bring peace to the world?
Oh, Kylie, that is such a good question. Yes, absolutely. In fact, I think that kids are sometimes better equipped to be peace builders than adults are, because kids and young people have really fresh perspectives, and they have a lot of energy and curiosity and are oftentimes more open and willing to learn, and to collaborate with other people. And so I think young people have a lot to teach adults and people who have been in this a really long time, new ways to come at peace building and new creative solutions to resolving conflicts. So yes, if you're a young person who's interested in peace and peace building, definitely feel like there's a place for you. It's really important to get involved if you're interested in it.
Amazing, amazing. Well, I wish that we had just all the time in the world to continue this conversation, but unfortunately, that's all the questions we can get to today. But Ellie, thank you so much for taking the time to answer them and just for being here to talk about your work. It's really inspiring, and I'm sure the students watching this today are inspired as well. So thank you.
It's my pleasure. Like I said, we really like connecting with people all over, and especially in this day and age, are really excited to talk about the work that we're doing and to connect with you all.
Yes, yes. I also just want to say thank you, of course, to whoever is tuning in today. It means a lot to us that you would come and learn more about the work that USIP is doing. So I do want to say that if you're interested in learning more, you can visit their website at usip.org. You can also follow them at Twitter. It's at Building Peace. So you can keep up with all of the awesome work that they're doing, as well as keeping up with us, DreamWakers. So we do these every weekday at 1 p.m. And if you want to hear about more of the great things that our Dream speakers are doing, you can tune into our Facebook Live. If you miss it, then that's totally fine, because we post all of our videos right here on our Facebook page after they air. So you can always come back and watch them. But that's all that we have for today. So Ellie, just thank you one more time, and I hope everyone has a great day. We'll see you next time.
Thank you.